Hi, I'm Julie McCluskie, the Director of Communications and Community Engagement for Summit School District, and we're here today for a spotlight with Superintendent Kerry Buhler and Board President Margaret Carlson to talk about our back-to-school adventures in Summit County. We've got a lot of construction projects that have been completed and both underway, and we'll be talking about our plans for this year and student success in Summit schools. Okay, we are ready to talk about back to school. Very excited to say that we've been in school about a month now, and we've got kids in classrooms and kids are learning. And probably one of the most exciting developments for us at the start of the school year is that we have completed a portion of our construction projects at a couple of the schools. And we want to talk about what we have done now in Summit School District over the past few years with a master planning process, and then the support we've received from our community for several bond projects as well as a mill levy that helps us with capital construction and technology needs. So Margaret, maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about where we've been and where we're headed.
Sure. We are at a really fun point in the process right now, having completed a few of those projects that you mentioned. But we began this process about 2 years ago with a master planning process, and we knew back then that it was really time again to take a look at all of our facilities, look at their condition, look at our capacity in the buildings, and try our best to project future enrollment and determine what our needs are now as well as what they'll be in the future.
Right.
So we began that process about 2 years ago, and from that we did get quite a bit of data. Lots of stuff we already knew, that we had maintenance needs that had been building up over the years.
And let me stop you there. Maintenance needs like what? Because I think it's I don't know,
so
interesting for our community to understand that much like a homeowner has to take care of their house, we've got buildings to take care of.
And that's it exactly. We've got mechanical, plumbing, electric, all those kinds of things that need to be upgraded from time to time, and we've been doing a good job of hitting those as they become critical needs in the district, but we definitely had a backlog of things that would be great to address if we had the funding to be able to do that.
Great.
So we got a list of those needs. We looked at our building capacities, and we already know that the middle school and the high school buildings need more capacity. Some of our elementaries are very close to capacity, but we did look at the programming, and we know we've got a few more years of space in our elementary buildings, especially if we take a closer look at how we use those buildings and what our elementary programming is.
Sure.
So we identified the needs, our immediate needs. We added those up, and we went to the voters last year. I don't know if people remember, but we were all out on the corner waving those signs, support strong Summit schools.
Yes.
And that's why I say it's really fun to be where we are right now.
Yeah.
We were very fortunate. We asked our voters in our community for a bond and a mill levy override to fund those critical repairs that we talked about, and additions to our middle school building, which also houses Snowy Peaks High School,
Right.
and our high school building. We know we needed to add on to those right away just to accommodate the kids that are already in our system. So we went to the voters. We were successful. We're so grateful that we were successful. We're so grateful to live in a community that values education and steps up to support us when we really need it in times like this. We know that living in Colorado, we, on the one hand, we are at the bottom end of the spectrum when it comes to education funding, K-12. Colorado does not stack up to the rest of the country,
Right.
Because of our tax structure. We just don't get as much funding as other states in the country. On the other hand, we are so very fortunate to live locally in a community that does support us. We've got countless community partners who step in to help us with financial resources or come into our buildings and offer their time and expertise to our students. So these projects that we're in the middle of right now, they really are community projects. We could not do projects of this scale without the support of our community. So we're really excited to be where we are in this process and share the final products with our community.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, and I certainly appreciate the number of community partners who have stepped up and voiced their support for what we were trying to accomplish last year, and now have been good partners in helping us do all this work. And I think, Kerry, it would be great for our viewers to hear what specifically has happened out there. What have we done, and what's in process, and what is happening this year, the future?
So exciting. So last year, after the bond and the mill levy were passed, we were fortunate enough to be able to jump right in with our designers and architects, talk about what it is we saw as our vision for our schools. We knew at the middle and high school we would be working with those additions, as well as some really innovative spaces inside of our buildings. So that work continued all last year, and we're at the point now where we're actually breaking ground at our middle school and our high school. Couldn't be more excited. You'll see some dirt, moving out and some moving around, and hopefully the snow stays away for about a month. And then we'll be working outside the buildings, and then we'll start working inside those buildings to build those spaces. We're also working on, really importantly, the security at every single building in our district. So middle and high school, of course. But the really exciting things that are happening this week is that we are actually cutting some ribbons. We're having ribbon cuttings at 3 of our elementary schools. We worked on the design process very efficiently last spring after we knew we had the funds. And we worked on the deficiencies that Margaret recommended or discussed, but also really exciting, what does security and safety look like at our buildings? And what do innovative learning spaces look like? So if you have a chance, we have ribbon cuttings actually the next couple of days, and we had one 2 days ago, Frisco, Upper Blue, and Silverthorne. And what you'll see in those spaces are unlike anything that you can imagine. It's not how I went to school. I'm excited for our kids now and into the future, but our media centers and spaces surrounding that are spaces that are flexible, innovative. We have maker spaces in every building. We'll be building STEM programs to fill those spaces, and of course the children will come. Teachers are really excited because this is very unlike what they've been doing in their buildings, and it's a chance for them to also really branch out and take those skills that we know kids need and build it in a really creative, collaborative, wonderful space. We also know that we have 3 more elementary schools on our list. So design advisory groups have begun for Breckenridge Elementary, Dillon Valley Elementary, and
Summit Cove.
Yes. And so it's really fun. We know that we won't break ground in those buildings. Well, I don't know if we're breaking ground, but a little bit of ground inside until the spring. So we've got some time. But I think those spaces are also going to be very different than what we've already designed in our first 3 buildings. So every building will really have a flavor and of their own, which should be the way it is. Every school is unique. Every school has different goals and different vision that all really meet the needs of our diverse population in our school district. So it couldn't be better. We are so fortunate, and all this work is really exciting.
I want to touch on a couple of things you said that I think are important. One around safety and security. For folks who have been here in the community for a while, they may remember that we went after a bond and mill in 2010. And at that time, we did security upgrades.
We did.
So what is different this go around? Why do we need additional funding for safety and security, Kerry?
So, lessons learned.
Yes.
As time passes, we know that different things may occur at buildings or in schools or in the world.
Yes.
And we learn lessons and we say, okay, what are other ways that we need to make sure that we are securing our buildings, making sure our children are safe? And so in all of our buildings, we're upgrading those secured vestibules. We have them in all of our buildings right now, but we know that we also want to have a more personal touch. And so we're bringing really that office personnel more closely connected to those spaces. We're also making those spaces a little more inviting, so they're not cold and they're not, you have to stand up and wait for someone to help you.
Yes.
We have nice seating areas. People will be able to drop things off quickly without even entering the building.
Right.
And then if you have business in the building or need to get into the building, that is not a problem either, because the receptionist or somebody in the building will greet you, find out what it is that you need. We'll make sure that we know who is entering our buildings, and they'll be able to do that very safely and securely. In addition, we have put intrusion-proof glazing, which is the glass, so that we know that we have to make sure that we do everything we can to keep our children safe.
Yes.
We have also we're upgrading all of the exterior doors in terms of key systems, as well as camera systems.
Great.
And lighting. And I think all of those things put together really not just give a sense of, what are the latest upgrades, but that truly we are paying attention to our protocols and our systems along with that.
That's a great comment. And I do think it's important for our community to understand that those vestibules where before they were secure, they are currently secure in the buildings that aren't under construction, but people will not be able to gain access to the building, all their business, unless, there is a reason for them to come in, will remain in that vestibule between the person and staff members. And so we're just limiting the number of people coming into the schools.
Yes.
It's definitely
very
more
important.
safe. I also liked your comment about the new spaces, those 21st century learning environments that we've created in these 3 elementary schools. And certainly a part of that is, and you referenced it, the changes that we've made in instructional technology. Our children now, because of our One to World initiative, all have their own device, helps open the world to them, allows them access to information, people, projects, ways to collaborate. And these new spaces help really support that change, that we're working now with devices and not really books on a shelf, right? So this collaborative environment, these collaborative spaces, flex spaces, and what exactly is a maker space for viewers that may not know?
Well, maker space is a terminology, actually a term that's been out there for a while. It started in libraries, where it was a space where kids could really come and make. And they could create,
right?
They could make things. And it was, you put all kinds of supplies and things out there, and kids did some designing and some prototyping, and really that design thinking protocol before we even defined it.
Yes.
And now what we know is that we have to be a little more intentional about that. And not that we don't give kids a lot of freedom in those spaces, but we're talking about soldering guns, and we're talking about drills, and we're talking about building materials that kids may or may not be able to access outside of school. And really the sky's the limit. So tying it into our curriculum, tying it into our standards, really teaching kids the art of that design process, where you're really thinking about an idea, thinking about possibilities, creating, trying something, that prototyping, and then saying, ooh, that didn't work. Let me try again. And the cycle begins again. Also, we know that we want kids to be communicating, collaborating. There's time that kids will work alone, but really it's a time for you to say, you know what, I don't normally work with you on a project, but hey, you have a great idea. Can I work on that with you as well? And that does go on in classrooms already, but now we have these amazing spaces and the materials to do it.
Terrific.
And that's really going to change, I think, what kids have access to, but also really the sky's the limit.
Totally agree. Very exciting. There was one last phase of our master plan, and we called it phase 2, and that was the creation of 2 advisory committees in our community, one for the north end of the county and one for the south end. And these committees met all of last year to look at a couple of things. The future really of our elementary schools, both our facilities and what you referred to, Margaret, with student enrollment, what we're expecting on the horizon, and how that growing student enrollment may impact our programming, what we're doing in buildings around instruction. Maybe you could speak a little bit to what that process was and why we did it, and some of our goals. And then Kerry, feel free to chime in. What were the outcomes and what are our next steps with that phase 2? So Margaret?
Sure. After the master planning process, we didn't have all of the answers. We still had some questions out there, specifically around the future use of our elementaries, land use with the land that we currently have, and building capacities, what we wanted to do with some of the elementaries that are older buildings and need a little more TLC to be brought up to where we want them to be. So we had some big decisions to make, and we as district leaders didn't necessarily feel comfortable making those decisions in a room by ourselves. We know that these are really community conversations.
Yes.
And we needed to bring in our community because they have big impacts just past, not only involving the education of our kids in the community, but bigger impacts, in terms of neighborhood schools versus bringing schools together. Things like that our community would really need to weigh in on. So we brought together these groups, one in the north end of the county and another in the south end of the county, because we really had some different issues to talk about at each end of the county. And we talked specifically about those questions. We put them out on the table, and we wanted to get all of the considerations that are out there on the table, so that when we make bigger decisions moving forward, we know what the impacts are, not just for our students and our staff, but really beyond out in the community. So we were really pleased we were able to bring together members of our community who were willing to put in this time with us. It took about 6 months, and we had big conversations about what are all the implications of these decisions moving forward. We brought together some of our bigger community partners, whether they be in the towns and the county, planners, and our business partners, our educational partners with from CMC to preschool, along with obviously our building principals, our staff, and parents who are in the buildings. And we had some big conversations around what to do with buildings, with land, with programming. And at the end of the day, we gathered a lot of considerations for us to think about as we move forward making decisions. And some recommendations came to the board out of those groups as well.
Awesome. It was quite the process. And I think there were times we were having some really hard conversations, and it got a little messy even, because people were asking questions we don't have the answers to. I think, at the end of it though, the feedback both from the committee members as well as our school board was positive, because it did help define some of our next steps. And Kerry, maybe you could speak to some of those, whether it be north or south end, some of the outcomes that came from those discussions.
Well, one of the things I think that's important is the conversation we had about land in both ends of the county. There's always that question out there is, how much land does the school district own? Where is that land? What are you planning to do with it? And we know in Summit County, obviously, land is a huge commodity for everybody, and we need to be thoughtful about that. And so those conversations will continue, but what was really, I think, powerful about it is that now everybody really understands what land we do have. We have a plot of land in Silverthorne. We have some land around Summit High School. We have some land by Upper Blue on Block 11, and that's about it. We also, explored the idea of, how landlocked are our elementary schools, and can they expand or will they not? And so as a result of that, a couple of things came out in terms of those things. One thing is our communities, our parents, our teachers, our kids, our community members, they value the community schools. They value those neighborhood schools. They, especially in Dillon Valley, people came with their hearts on their sleeves and really talked about what that school means to them. Yep. And as a result of that, the recommendation that went forward to the board really was that we want to do everything we can within the current dollars and future dollars to make sure that Dillon Valley is well taken care of, viable, has enough space for our students, and of course has those innovative spaces. And so one of those things is looking really more closely at Dillon Valley. Silverthorne, on the other hand, we've had some issues with parents not necessarily keeping their kids at Silverthorne Elementary School, or perhaps not choosing elementary or Silverthorne Elementary when their children enter kindergarten. Dual language is offered at Dillon Valley. We have a STEM school in Frisco. So for some parents, they have chosen to take their children elsewhere, and we have open enrollment in our district, and we support that and love that. But we also know that Silverthorne is a wonderfully viable school and ready and ripe for the right thing. And so one of the recommendations was to take a look at the programming there. Yes. And making sure that what is being offered there and what parents, families, community kids can expect and want, we will offer. And so we have started that group, started talking about what are those big questions and where do we want to take that. And we'll be communicating and connecting with community partners, with parents, of course staff, teachers, and maybe even students to say what is it that we want for Silverthorne Elementary. We also now know the town of Silverthorne has been working very hard on the viability of their community, and we want to be part of that, and they've been great partners. So that's, another thing. We want to look at early childhood. Yes. Obviously, early childhood is very important to everybody in the community, and we are a big piece of that. We do offer preschool in 5 of our 6 elementary schools, but we know that if we had more funding and we had more space, we would even love to have more children. I think the centers feel the same way. Are there children out there that maybe we don't have space for or are not getting their needs met? And so that community conversation will continue to talk about preschool in all of Summit County. In addition, we talked a little bit about between Breck and Upper Blue, which gets a little controversial, as people know, because people do love their schools. But we also know that Breckenridge is one community. We have 2 elementary schools. That's unlike anywhere else in our county. And we talked a lot about, should we have 2 elementary schools, or should we expand on Block 11 where we have space and build, perhaps a preschool through 2nd grade school and a 3 through 5. And in my mind, I think, how about a STEM lab? And how about a art center? And, all those things. And also we know that Breckenridge Elementary has a lot of deficiencies, and that building needs some work, and we're going to address those things because right now our enrollment is not pushing us to make an immediate decision in either of those schools, but we know long term we may want to go there. And so the community was great about having those conversations with us. Yes. We, of course, spent a lot of time with Town of Breck because, of course, there are important partners in the Breckenridge area, and then we'll continue that conversation as we move forward.
You've certainly hit upon some really big outcomes from those groups, and for our viewers, you can go to our website, summitk12.org, and find information about both our construction projects as well as the North and South End advisory committees and those outcomes, those things that you've talked about, Kerry. You can follow us on Twitter at #BuildingVision2020. We try to provide updates on the construction projects and where they're at. And in just a moment, we'll come back and talk a little bit about what's happening in our schools for students this year around instruction and Vision 2020 version 2.0.